This episode of My Weird Record Collection discusses activities frequently used for gambling. If you gamble for need rather than for fun, if you spend more on gambling than you can afford, or if you use dishonest means to fund or encourage your gambling, you may have a problem, but you can get help. In the United States, you can call the National Council on Problem Gambling helpline at 1-800-GAMBLER. In the UK, you can reach out to the National Gambling Helpline at 0808-8020-133. For other countries, please see the list in the show notes for this episode, located at the website myweirdrecords.fab4it.com.
Gentlemen, get the thing straight once and for all. The policeman isn't there to create disorder. The policeman is there to preserve disorder.
Cross Alhambra intersection at 15000. Contact Los Angeles Center, 2 minutes northeast of the stadium intersection. Expect further clearance no later than 0952 Greenwich.
Do it once, do it twice, do it over again.
Not too many times.
Greetings, friends, and happy May. Sean here with episode 5 of My Weird Record Collection. I don't know about you listeners in the rest of the world, but for those of us here in the United States, May brings not one but two major horse races. The Kentucky Derby, which happened about a week and a half ago from when you're listening to this, and the Preakness Stakes, which will be just a few days from the time this episode is released. Because of that, I thought an appropriate topic to discuss for this episode is an interesting piece of pop culture history from 1976 called They're at the Post, a horse racing game in which you gamble on horse races that are on 4 records. And despite these races being on records, you don't know who will win the race. How is that possible? Well, just keep on listening and you'll find out. But first, I'd like to address a piece of feedback. This actually comes from the person who suggested that I do this podcast in the first place. My longtime friend and Pie Factory podcast co-host Jim, who shared this in response to my wife Lisa's comment from episode 4, in which I discussed the record, Hear How to Plan the Perfect Dinner Party. Her comment was about how in 1960, when you're lighting bananas on fire, the hostess would probably have to have been careful not to light herself on fire because of all the Aquanet she likely had in her hair. Here's what Jim had to say about that. He says, and I quote, "Sometime in the mid-90s, I went to get a snack at the family table, locally known as The Stable in Joliet, Illinois." I'm going to interrupt this right here. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the family table. It's one of those American dinery kind of places where there's a really huge menu and you get cheap but good food. And back when I was in college, at least, that was the place to go if it was 2 a.m. and you were hungry. It's Greek owned, and that's going to explain a few things in a moment. But it later became the Melrose. It was just the same restaurant, same owners and everything. And I don't remember what it's called now, but the same location is still there, different name, same owners, except I think it's only open for breakfast and lunch, unfortunately. But anyway, getting back to Jim's story of the family table, he says, "I ordered my favorite appetizer, saganaki. Saganaki being a Greek-inspired dish invented at the long-gone Parthenon restaurant in Chicago, which is Kasseri cheese." Oh man, I might be saying that wrong. Maybe it's Kasseri. I think it's Kasseri. I'm going to say Kasseri. I apologize if I'm incorrect, but Kasseri cheese doused in brandy and lit on fire tableside. When the cheese lights up, everyone in the restaurant says, "Opa!" Then the flame is put out with fresh squeezed lemon juice. Going to interrupt again. I tried that once at Family Table, or Family Stable, as we called it, because I was curious. Practically every time I was there, I would see that happen. Somebody would order the saganaki, and the waitress would set it on fire, and then she'd squeeze a lemon to put the fire out. And I liked the aroma of it. I liked the cheesy smell, so just one day I decided to try it. And really, at least for me, it wasn't the end-all, be-all. It was fine. It was fine. Imagine, say, the taste of a Cheez-It snack cracker, but with the texture of, I don't know, chicken skin, except much softer. and with a little bit of lemon flavor because of the lemon juice, of course. I mean, it was good, but it just wasn't my favorite thing in the world. But anyway, Jim goes on to say, your warning against hairspray is a real issue, as my waitress had generous helpings of Aqua Net in her hair, and her hair caught fire. I couldn't put it out because I had no water or napkins yet. Fortunately, the table next to mine did, and everything turned out well. Well, that's good. Jim, thank you for sharing that. That's an entertaining story, and I never saw anything like that happen myself. The worst thing I ever saw with a waitress in a restaurant was a couple of years ago at a Cracker Barrel. A waitress whom I recognized from college, by the way, tripped and spilled an entire tray on some poor lady. But anyway, having said all that, the Parthenon in Chicago, that was in a part of Chicago called Greektown, because there are a lot of Greek people there. It abruptly closed in September 2016, just a week after they had a booth at Taste of Greektown. They were shut down the previous March for health code violations. I don't think it was ever known exactly why they permanently shut down. Oh, by the way, in Jim's feedback, he also mentioned that my favorite restaurant, the Weber Grill restaurant, there are 4 locations, by the way. There's one in downtown Chicago. There's another in downtown Indianapolis. There's one in Schaumburg, which is about 20 miles northwest of downtown Chicago, give or take. That's just an approximation. And another one in Lombard, which is west of Chicago. And they're all excellent. They're all great. There used to be one just on the outskirts of St. Louis in a mall, and it was easily reachable by mass transit. I went there once. That was a really nice place. But yeah, it's so-called Weber Grill restaurant because just about everything on the menu is cooked on Weber charcoal grills, and it is indoor cooking. It's outdoor cooking brought indoors. So Jim wanted to point that out because I raised concern about the thought of charcoal grilling indoors. Well, here's my response to that. At home, do not do any charcoal cooking inside unless you want carbon monoxide poisoning. The thing is, the Weber Grill restaurant is designed with the proper built-in ventilations and everything that makes charcoal grilling where they are and how they do it safe. So there's a difference between, say, an enterprise level, say, HVAC system and what you have at home. So, yeah. Thanks again, Jim. Also, since I last talked to you all, Record Store Day happened. I figured I should mention that since this is essentially a record collecting podcast. That was April 22nd. I went to my local neighborhood record store, Rattleback Records on the north side of Chicago. It's just a few blocks away from me. They open at 10 a.m. on Record Store Day simply for Record Store Day purchases. They don't really want people to go shopping around inside and grabbing stuff off the shelf that's not part of Record Store Day, basically just so they can keep the line moving and everything. And here I was seeing on Facebook and Twitter and other social media, people were posting about, hey, I'm at such and such a store already and it's 3 a.m. And I'm thinking, dude, you don't need to get there that early. I figured, hey, if I get in line by 8:30, I should be pretty close to the front of the line. So at 8:30, I hop on my bike, I go over to Rattleback Records, and the line is huge. Now, Rattleback Records is just one building north of the nearest intersection, which is Clark Street and Balmoral Avenue. The line stretched all the way north to the next street up, which is Rasher Avenue, and it went about halfway down Rasher. And I had never, ever, ever seen a Record Store Day line that long in my life. I don't always do the Record Store Day thing because, well, not every time is there anything on the list that I care for, but this time there was a thing on the Record Store Day list that I really wanted, and that was the soundtrack album to the movie Wonderwall. It's called Wonderwall Music, and it was George Harrison's second solo album. His first solo album, anybody? No, Not All Things Must Pass. That was after Wonderwall Music. His first solo album was Electronic Sound. He was basically experimenting with a Moog, or if you want to be ultra correct in the pronunciation, Moog synthesizer. And his next album, which came shortly after that, was Wonderwall Music, which he recorded over a time during 1967 and 1968, and I had heard pieces of it before, and I really liked it, but I could never find a copy out in the wild. So I saw that Wonderwall music was on the Record Store Day list, and I said, okay, yep, I'm going to Record Store Day and going to grab that sucker. Thing is, it's on a picture disc, which is a good thing if you like interesting looking vinyl, but a bad thing in that because of the nature of picture discs, they play back a little bit on the noisy side. They're not clean sounding records. You're going to hear noise once the stylus goes over the part of the vinyl that has the picture underneath it. The vinyl itself does not compose the picture. The picture is actually under the vinyl. It's coated by the vinyl, but there's something in the process that makes it not play back the best that it can. In terms of the sound quality, whoever mastered it did a really good job of it. It sounds great, other than the surface noise you get just by the nature of picture discs. And the cool thing about this one is it's got a zoetropic, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, print, which means that there are a series of drawings that if you have a strobe light set at the proper strobe rate, it'll be a little animation on your turntable. And I think if anybody has this Record Store Day release of Wonderwall music and you want to see that in action, get a strobe light app for your smartphone, assuming you have a smartphone, and set it to blink at 1900 RPMs. I think that's the recommended rate. And you can kind of see the animation as the record spins around on the turntable. Now, the way that Rattleback Records does Record Store Day is when people are in line, they periodically have somebody from the store printed out spreadsheets of what titles they were given for Record Store Day, and they hand out pens and they ask you to mark off what you want. And when I was going through the list, I saw the soundtrack from It Was a Short Summer, Charlie Brown by Vince Guaraldi. I love Peanuts, and especially Vince Guaraldi era Peanuts. I don't remember if I ever saw It Was a Short Summer, Charlie Brown, but I definitely had the 7-inch book and record version when I was a little kid. And somehow it eluded me that soundtrack was being released on Record Store Day. So I marked that off. The last Peanuts soundtrack that came out was A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. And I was kind of on the fence about that, but I decided to take a chance on it. And it turned out I loved it. The problem with it, if there is a problem, is that unlike the soundtrack for A Charlie Brown Christmas, there was never intended to be a companion album released for it. So all it is just a bunch of musical cues, really, for the most part, from the TV special. But the way it was, they found the original audio masters for it, and it sounds fantastic. I'm not a big fan of A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, but man, I love the soundtrack album. It's really good. Definitely check it out if you don't have it. I think it's available on all formats, vinyl, CD, and streaming and download. So give it a shot. It's really good. So I thought, okay, I should take a chance on this too. But the way that Rattleback works on Record Store Day is you go in, and when it's your turn in line, you hand your spreadsheet to whoever is working behind the counter who's free, and they'll pull out the record for you and hand it to you. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, they had already run out of It Was a Short Summer, Charlie Brown, but they had a few Wonderwalls in stock. So I got the Wonderwall music album. And by the way, yes, the Oasis song Wonderwall does take its name from the movie Wonderwall, or at least the George Harrison album. And something else that totally slipped my mind was that the soundtrack from the movie Airplane by, I think, was it Elmer Bernstein was out. And they had a crap ton of copies, so I grabbed one of those too. But I realized, wait a minute, if I'm going to listen to this, I'm going to play it once and then forget about it. Because really, the music, you really need the movie with the music. The music is very well done for the movie, but you kind of need both of them together. And I think what especially turned me off was it looked like there were audio clips from the movie itself. And I figured, why don't I just watch the movie? I have it on DVD. So yeah, I did not get that. I only ended up with the George Harrison album. But having said that, I did see that there were a couple of Beatles 3-inch singles, and I had no interest in those because, well, 3-inch singles, there's no way they're going to sound good, number one. And number two, you got to have that little special $100 record player to play that thing. Well, over that weekend, I had found out, no, you didn't need the special player. Well, I had to go back to Rattleback the next Monday because I realized I had run out of inner sleeves and outer sleeves. You heard me preach about those things in a previous episode, I hope. So I went back and I saw that they still had a couple of those 3-inch Beatles singles in stock. And being the Beatles fan I am, I said, you know what, let me have those. I got She Loves You and Till There Was You. And you don't need a special adapter. The spindle holes will fit a standard spindle on any turntable. It was a little bit of a tight fit, but just a little tiny bit of a push went right on. And they played fine. They play back at 33 1/3 RPMs. The sound quality was shockingly good for what it was. I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty good. It's pretty good. Till There Was You was the stereo version, and She Loves You was one of the mono versions. It was not the new Peter Jacksonized stereo mix that was just made last year. But they both sounded really good. It's just one song. They don't have B-sides. Probably not going to play them again, though. But I still have them for the novelty. The only complaint I have about them is that you have to do a little bit of damage to actually open them, because there's a sticker on them that you really don't want to have to take off. But if you don't, you're not going to listen. I don't buy records without listening to them. I'm not one of those, I'm going to keep this for an investment or just for display. No, I'm going to enjoy what I buy. But I did, and it works. The only thing, if you're ever thinking of getting one of those novelty 3-inch records, if you have a turntable with an automatic return, it's probably not going to be able to play those records because the tone arm has to go really far in to reach the groove. And on those auto returns or auto shutdown players, the mechanism will kick in long before the tone arm gets to where it would have to be to play it. So if you have a manual turntable, like say the Technics SL1200 or any of its clones, such as the Audio-Technica LP120 series, or God help you, one of those all-in-one Crosley units or something of the same ilk, I guess, you'll be able to play it. But if you have an auto return or auto shutoff, probably not. Probably not. But that was my record store day for April of 2024. Now, having said that, let's get into today's featured topic, which is They're at the Post. They're at the Post is not just a record. It's 4 records. Oh, but it's not just 4 records. It's a complete game, and it's from 1976. There's also a version of it called Special Edition, in which there's only 1 record. But hey, let's talk about the game itself, and I'm talking the complete version. It is a horse racing game that brings the sport of horse racing and all that goes with it, minus the actual horses, into your home. I guess technically you could classify it as a board game, even though there isn't really a board. I say you could classify it as a board game because it does have an entry on BoardGameGeek.com, and I will link that in the show notes. Basically, you bet on horse races just as you would at the track or at your local OTB place. You fill out forms, submit a bet, all that good stuff. You can bet on a daily double, exacta, show, place, win. Any number of players can participate, and the game comes with everything you need, including bankers' records, racing programs, and even fake money in denominations of singles, 2s, 5s, 10s, and 20s. But what races are you betting on? You're betting on 8 races spread across 4 records, 1 race per side of each record. But wait, given that it's on a record, wouldn't you know who wins just by playing it? Well, not really. You see, the records are parallel groove or multi-groove records. In case you don't know what that is, here's an explanation. Your standard record of any length, be it a single, an album, an EP, has only 1 groove per side. It's just a concentric that goes around the record a bunch of times until it reaches the end. However, there are records that have multiple grooves. One of the most famous modern examples is the Monty Python Matching Tie and Handkerchief album, whose second side has 2 different grooves with different content. So your side 2 listening experience is a luck of the draw. Creative people have implemented this parallel groove method of pressing records to simulate horse racing, and They're at the Post is not the first example. One earlier example I found is from approximately the 1930s, a 10-inch 78 RPM shellac disc from Decca Records in England, and it's called Magitrack. Magitrack is a horse racing record that has 6 grooves, 1 groove for each winning horse. And wherever you happen to place the needle, notice I said needle and not stylus because back in the shellac days, it was an actual needle that played the records. But wherever you put your needle, or if you listen to it nowadays, stylus, that is what determines what horse wins.
They're out of sight at the moment, but I can hear the crowd cheering. They'll come into view any moment. Yes, here they come, round the bend into the straight, tightly packed in a bunch. There's not a thing to choose between them. Yes, there's a couple coming out now. Coming up the rails, neck and neck. One's going ahead towards the post. Centurion wins.
Other horse racing records include Decca Derby, also from England, circa 1937, Derby winner race records from West Coast Novelty Company in San Francisco from about the 1940s, photo finish horse race from Mason Williams Company of Chicago from about 1945, and no, that's not the classical gas Mason Williams, and horse and auto race game featuring Henny Youngman of all people from about 1960. They're at the post, of course, is another such game.
Chalco, first to show in front, moves right out to get the lead. Good Fortune right alongside second. Paid Sun is third, with Get a Load of This fourth. Sweet Ballad fifth on the outside.
There are 8 horses for each race. Each side has 8 grooves, 1 per winning horse. The front of the box brags 8 complete races, each with an unpredictable photo finish. 4 unique LP records. Any horse can win. You won't believe it till you've played it. First of all, parallel grooves were not a new concept in 1976, so if you knew that a record could theoretically have multiple grooves, you'd believe it without playing it. Also, as a pedant, I have a problem with the 4 unique LP records claim. Now, LP stands for long playing or long player, a term used to distinguish from singles, which have 1 band per side, and EPs or extended plays, which typically have 2 bands per side. Each race, including the introductory and post-race announcements, is just a skosh over 2.5 minutes long, which is hardly long playing. Having said that, though, if you look at the surface of the records, you see that there is hardly any blank space between the end of the content and the record label. A typical long player has between half an inch and an inch of dead wax, as some call it. But there's barely a quarter of an inch at the end of each they're at the post record side, if that. And the stylus actually traverses across the entire playing surface during those 2 minutes, and it's really fascinating to actually be able to see the tone arm move as the record's playing at 33 1/3 RPM. I actually recorded video of that happening, and there will be a link to that video in this episode's show notes at myweirdrecords.fab4it.com. Now, what I found fascinating about these records as a result of the 8 parallel grooves, if you've ever listened to records on a manual turntable, you might be familiar with the sound of the run-out groove hitting the stylus with every rotation until you either stop the platter from spinning or you pick up the tone arm. Well, because there are 8 parallel grooves on there at the post, you will actually hear all 8 of the grooves smacking against the stylus, and you're going to hear that right now. Now, more about that parallel groove thing. One caveat is that if you have an automatic turntable, that is a turntable in which the tone arm can place itself on the record without you ever touching it, using the automatic features could actually make it so that the stylus lands on the same groove every dang time, meaning that you always get the same horse to win. I mean, you could use that as an advantage to cheat, I suppose, but if you have an automatic turntable and you really want to make sure that the winner is as random as possible, you might want to consider manually placing the tone arm just to reduce the chance that you'll have a predictable race. These fictitious races, by the way, are announced by veteran horse racing announcer Jack Lamar, and I was able to find out some information about him on the web. He was born Lamar Spiewak and served in the Marine Corps between 1944 and 1946. His classmates at the Bessie V. Hicks School of Drama in Philadelphia included, by the way, Jack Klugman and Charles Bronson. He was a radio announcer at WCAM in Camden, New Jersey. Oh, poor guy. Between 1948 and 1980, doing the morning drive. Why was he chosen as the announcer for There at the Post, though? Probably because of his experience being the announcer at Keystone Racetrack in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, from when it opened in November 1974, and he held on to that job until 1987, by which time the track was renamed Philadelphia Park. Nowadays, that venue is called Parx, P-A-R-X, Casino and Racing. His horse race calling career also included Dover Downs in Delaware, Marlboro Downs in Maryland, Hialeah Park in Florida, Garden State Park in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and Atlantic City Racetrack. Any guesses as to where that last one is? Over the years, he also hosted racing shows on local cable in Cherry Hill. He retired in 1988, died in April 2006 at the age of 80, and was inducted into the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame on November 18, 2011. As for the company that distributed this game, well, at least in America, it was distributed by Promotional Applications Incorporated of Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. Upon Googling that company, it appears that, first of all, not only is it no longer in business, but it also appears that its address of 200 Office Center Drive no longer exists. Yeah, the address doesn't exist anymore. But I was able to find a New York Times article about There at the Post from July 18th, 1976, written by Lawrence van Gelder, or if you really want to be Dutch about it, Lawrence van Gelder, and it was called A Good Track Record. See what he did there? There's a quote from Promotional Applications Inc.'s executive vice president, whose name was Dick Lean. Yeah. Mr. Lean said that the game was developed the previous year by a Canadian horse racing aficionado and introduced at Christmas in London and Canada. When it was released in the United States, the game retailed at $25 at Bloomingdale's, Brentano's, and FAO Schwartz. The article talks about a reported incident in which a worker at an automobile plant in Canada would actually broadcast the races over the factory PA, and he got fired over it. The copyright holder listed on the box is Maas Marketing, M-A-A-S. I couldn't find out anything about that firm, and if you Google it, you'll get a modern PR firm that is definitely not the same company that handled this game. From what I gather, Maas, and by the way, that S is lowercase, not uppercase, Maas Marketing is the company that originally released There at the Post in Canada. Remember how I said that Jack Lamar is the announcer? Well, several other sources I've found said that Darrell Wells, who is quoted on the back of the box, is the announcer, but either someone misinterpreted the box calling him Canada's voice of racing to mean that he was the voice on this record, or these records, I should say, or maybe he actually is the announcer on the original Canadian release. I wasn't able to confirm. But speaking of Canada, in 1975, as I just mentioned, a version of this game was released in England. The British version was called They're Off. Noel Whitcomb was the announcer on that version, and that version was distributed by Ronco.
They're under starter's orders. Any moment now. They're off! One of the first to break is Gunner Smith, with Regal Bob also fast away, and Encheval between these two. Koriyoko missed the break there, but he's making up fast, and as they settle down, it's Regal Bob and Gunner Smith taking them on, and as they come to the furlong marker, it's Encheval, Gunner Smith, then Persian Rose in third. Lim Thomas has really set from here like, and he's going for that winning post like a homing pigeon with Rolls-Royce engines. At the line, it's Blubby the winner, Koriyoko second, Persian Rose third, and then the early leaders, Gunner Smith and Regal Bob with Dusky Bell.
The game was also released in Norway under the title Entesure, and there's also a French-Canadian version called C'est le départ. There might be other international versions, but these are the ones I was definitely able to ascertain. I mentioned earlier there's another American version called They're at the Post Special Edition that was released by Ronco with an As Seen on TV banner in the upper left corner. This version only contains just one record and the game pieces, and it was packaged in a much thinner box than was the 4-disc version. Speaking of the packaging, the full 4-record version of the game is packaged kind of like a board game, but in a 13 by 13 inch box. Unfortunately, because it's packaged like a board game, those who owned They're at the Post likely stored it along with other board games in the way you typically would store board games. in stacks, probably along with Monopoly, Scrabble, and Payday. The thing is, you don't want to store records horizontally. That could cause warping, and that's exactly what happened to my Disc 4 in the package that I have. There's clearly some flutter and wow during the first call trumpet at the beginning of each race, indicating that the record was either pressed off-center at the factory or more likely the record was slightly warped. By the way, here's some trivia for you. First call, that's the name of the trumpet music you hear at the beginning of horse races. It is a military bugle call used to alert trumpeters at 5:50 in the morning that they would need to blow reveille in 10 minutes. In horse racing, first call is a signal that it's time for the horses and jockeys to leave the paddocks, that is, the enclosures where the horses are kept, and be prepared to race. Interestingly, in this game, the first call blow is in the key of B. I'm used to hearing it in the key of B flat. I don't know. Are there B trumpets? I guess there must be. The lid of the package is orange tinted with a picture of 6 horses and jockeys in mid-race. On the 4-record version, the lid has the bullet points I mentioned before. The single disc special edition box lid also boasts 4 race programs, play money, betting tickets, and banker records complete instructions. Now, I had heard about horse racing records before. I believe I first heard about them when I read Eric Idle's book, Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, when he was talking about that Monty Python album I mentioned earlier. So when I went to Beverly Records on the south side of Chicago, I was thrilled when I saw they're at the post in the miscellaneous section, because I'm thinking, oh, is that one of those horse racing records in which there are multiple grooves? Yep, that's what it was. Beverly Records, by the way, has been around forever. At least they were around in 1996, 1997, when I was really starting to get into record shopping. But I never actually went there until January of this year. And those of you listening in the future, I'm talking 2024. It's an interesting store. It's pretty huge, and you could potentially spend all day in there. It's a bit confusing to navigate because there are 2 main sections, one where you'll find a popular music artist, and another section where you might find that same artist, but the album might be in pretty bad shape and priced dirt cheap. Like in case you want it for framing, or you're only looking for, say, the record and not the record cover. You just want to replace the I don't know, one of those kinds of deals. Problem is, I live on the far north side of Chicago, and Beverly Records is on the very, 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 very far south side. If you don't know Chicago, let me tell you, it is a huge city. I don't think people from out of town appreciate it. Chicago is huge. Going from my home in Edgewater to Beverly Records is practically a day trip, but I'll definitely be making more trips there. Jack and Randy at Beverly Records are not paying me to say this. I'm saying this on my own. When I talk about a specific store in this podcast, it's because I really, really, really like it. Same goes for Rattleback Records, whom I mentioned earlier. Same goes for Lori's Planet of Sound, who provided me with other records I've talked about so far, including Hear How to Plan a Perfect Dinner Party and the 2 Auto Harp records from episode 3. So yeah, I was thrilled to find this, but what I was not thrilled about was that it did not include the full game. It was basically just the box with the plastic foam insert that's carved to fit all the game pieces that were missing. But it did have all 4 of the records and in order form, so you could get more betting slips, but nothing else. But the good news is I was able to piece together an almost complete game thanks to various vendors on eBay. I say almost complete because I think there might be a piece or 2 missing from what I have, and I'll tell you what at least is now part of my copy at this point. Besides the 4 records, there is a multi-page 9 1/4 inch by 11 1/2 inch booklet that has what you need to play the game. Inside of the front cover, there are the rules of the game, and the bottom of the page has a set of disclaimers, one of which answered a question I had most of the time when I was researching the game. Are the horses and jockeys based on actual horses and jockeys? Because I don't know anything about horse racing. These could be real, they could be fake, I don't know. But according to the disclaimers, the names of the horses and jockeys used in They're at the Post are fictitious. Any resemblance to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. I actually did some Googling and found that a few of the horses' names in the game actually have existed in more recent years. Get a Load of This is an example of a horse name that's, I think, currently in use. I might not be correct about that, though. Another disclaimer warns all persons using this game with the intent to gamble with genuine currency do so at their own risk. The manufacturers and distributors and retailers involved with the distribution of this game will not be responsible for any violation of federal or state gambling statutes. Anywho, here are the rules of They're at the Post. Each player receives the program. One player is designated the banker, who will distribute $50 in assorted denominations to each player. All bets must be placed before each race begins. All daily double bets must be placed before the first race is run. The player with the most money at the end of the session wins the game. Duh! Now, this is an interesting one. Rule number 6 is, and I quote, "They're at the Post photo finish record is to be played at 33 RPM. I have no idea why they had to spell that out as a rule, but for what it's worth, the playback speed is not indicated on the record labels, at least not on the version that I have, and that is somewhat unusual. Usually they tell you on the label. I don't think the playback speed would affect the outcome of the game, although some automatic turntables might place the stylus on the very wrong part of the record if you set the speed to, say, 45 RPM, because if you set many automatic units to 45 RPM, they assume that you're playing a 7-inch single. Now, Rule 7 is interesting. It reads, "Bets are recorded on the betting tickets provided. When torn in half, the stub is the bettor's receipt, with the other half being kept by the banker." All right, that is your first indication that, well, the materials provided with this game will only last you a limited time, and that's where they get you. The betting tickets are going to be torn in half. That means you can't use them again, right? Also, you have to write the number of the race and the number of the horse on the betting tickets, as well as the amount, further limiting the shelf life of the tickets. Aha, fear not. If you need more betting tickets, you can order more with one of 3 order forms at the back of the booklet. You can get a pack of betting slips, which includes 80 various pieces that include win, place, show, and daily double betting slips for $3.50 a pack. While I'm at it, I will tell you you can also reorder packs of play money, each including 50 singles, 50 $2 bills, 50 $5 bills, 50 sawbucks, and 50 $20 bills, all for $2.50 a pack. You can order a set of bankers records containing 25 bankers record slips at $1 per set. Also, a complete refill set containing all the paper goods could be ordered for $5 per pack. And for $25, you could order the entire game, referred to as the deluxe version of They're at the Post, in, as it says, colorful gift package. Oh, and when ordering, don't forget to include $1 for postage and handling. Also, when sending your order form to Ronco Inc.'s post office box in Chicago, don't forget that this game is from 1976 and is no longer available. Going back to the rules, in big bold letters, you are told, when a race is over, the banker must record the finish at once. This is important. If the banker fails to record the winning horse correctly, you cannot repeat the record, as the results may not be the same. Wonder how many fights broke out over the banker being accused of not recording the winner properly. Furthermore, the instructions allow for 2 sets of rules to choose from. First, there's Rules A, winner take all. Under Rules A, each winner picks a horse in the first race to bet on. Actually, it says he is going to bet on, so I guess women aren't allowed to play this game? But whatever the case, there is a reminder about the daily double, in which before the first race happens, you can bet on a combination of the winners in both the first and second race. The winner who correctly predicts the winners of both races gets the entire pool of daily double money. If there's a tie, the money gets split evenly among the daily double winners. Otherwise, for standard bets, the banker divvies the money that was bet on the race evenly among the winners. Repeat for each subsequent race. Now, the B set of rules is for parimutuel odds. Rule 1 reads, and I quote, players can place bets on any horses in any positions up to any amount of money previously agreed to by the players and the banker. For example, $2 on number 3 to win, $10 on number 7 to place, $5 on number 5 to show, etc. Now, I don't know horse racing, as I said before, so I had to look up those terms. In case you also don't know, if you bet on place, it means that the horse must finish first or second. If you bet on show, it means that the horse must finish first, second, or third. Of course, a place bet winner has a smaller payout than a win bet, and a show bet winner has a smaller payout than a place bet. But how much are those payouts? I hope you can follow math formulas, because I will read you what it says here. For win pool payoffs, here is the formula, and I quote, total the amount of money bet on all horses to win. They call that T. Take the total amount bet on the winning horse, B, and subtract it from the win pool. This will give you the parimutuel result, P. Divide that amount by B and add $1. This will give you a payout amount for each winning ticket per $1 bet. Okay, did you get that? It gets better. Here's how you calculate a place payout, and I quote, total the amount of money bet on all horses to place, T. Let's assume that the amount is $92. Assume that horse number 6 won the race with $24 bet on it to place second. Assume that horse number 4 is second with $10 bet on it to place second. The total bet on these horses is $34. Follow the formula. $92 T minus $34 B equals $58 P. Divide $58 P by 2, that is 2 horses, you get a result of $29. For a payoff on horse number 6, for a place bet, divide $29 by the amount bet on number 6 to place, i.e. $29 divided by $24 bet, or $1.20. Payoff is $1.20 plus $1, or $2.21 per $1 bet. For the payoff on horse number 4, for a place bet, divide $29 by the amount bet on number 4 to place, i.e. $29 divided by a $10 bet, or $2.90. Payoff is that $2.90 plus $1, or $3.90 per $1 bet. Okay, do you like that one? Good, because it gets even better. Here's what it says, verbatim, for show pool payoff calculations. Total the amount of money bet on all the horses to show, T. Let's assume that the amount is $70. A. Assume horse number 6 won the race with $12 bet on it to show. B. Assume horse number 4 placed with $8 bet on it to show. C. Assume horse number 2 finished third with $5 bet on it to show. The total bet on A, B, and C is $25. Once again, follow the formula. $70 T minus $25 B equals $45 P. Divide $45 P by 3, that is 3 horses, you get a result of $15. For a payout on horse number 6, the winning horse, for a show bet, divide $15 by the amount bet on number 6 to show, $12, or $1.20. Payoff is $1.20 plus $1 per $1 bet. For a payoff on horse number 4, that came in second, for a show bet, divide 15 by the amount bet on number 4 to show, $8, or $1.80. Payoff is $1.80 plus $1 per $1 bet. For a payoff on horse number 2, the third finisher, for a show bet, divide $15 by the amount bet on the number 2 horse to show, $5, or $3. Payoff is $3 plus $1 per $1 bet. Whew. Okay, I'm generally good with math, but yeah, when I play this game, I'm going to stick to rules A. That's the inner cover of the booklet. The rest of the booklet, including the back cover, contains various perforated goodies, most of which you tear out and store in the plastic foam insert in the box. The first page in my copy is already torn out, so I don't know exactly what it would have contained, but the next several perforated pages included 2 single-sided pages each of win betting slips, place betting slips, and show betting slips. After that, I have 2 pages each of play money in various denominations, 12 bills per page. My booklet has $2 bills, $5 bills, and $10 bills. As implied by the order form I mentioned earlier, there probably should also be 2 pages each of singles and $20 bills, but they're not in the copy of the booklet that I have. I'm assuming they were removed by a previous owner. The last page in my book before the back cover was obviously deperforated, but I'm guessing it's a page of banker's records. The loose page of banker's records that I have is torn out, and when I align it with that leftover perforation stub, it lines up perfectly in the booklet, so I'm assuming the stub is where the banker's records were. There are 4 banker's records per side, each requiring the banker to make notes of the winners, placers, and showers for each race, plus a record for daily double winners. Also included with the game are racing programs. They're little yellow pamphlet-like things. There's a picture of a horse with a jockey on it that says, "They're at the post" on the top of it. I have one in my hand right now. The instructions imply that these programs are to be distributed to 6 players, and if there are more than 6 players, then the extra players have to share. The pack that I ordered from eBay had 7, so I don't know what that's all about, but hey, I'm not complaining. Now, the first few pages of the programs repeat the rules, except instead of 2 sets of rules, this one has 3, with rules A being the winner-take-all and rules C being parimutuel odds. Rules B is called odds cards, which is a variation of winner-take-all. Each player bets on a horse, and then the odds cards, which my game does not have, so maybe that's what's missing from my booklet. The odds cards are shuffled, and the player draws an odds card after betting. The odds card will tell the player how much the payoff will be if the chosen horse wins, places, or shows. I'm not going to go over all the details here. Basically, the rules say the banker pays out based on the instructions on the odds cards, and before the next race, the odds cards are collected from all players and reshuffled. After the rules, there is 1 page detailing each race. We have the names and numbers of each horse, the stable colors, the jockeys, and the distance in furlongs for each race. The first race, just for an example, is 6 furlongs, and it's the first half of the daily double. It doesn't say this on the program, but on the actual record, it says the race is for 3-year-old horses. Now, here's the thing. Why the program lists the stable colors of a fictitious horse in a fictitious race, I have no idea, because it's an all-audio thing. Even on the records, there are only a couple of times when Jack Lamar says the colors of a particular horse, and not even for every horse in the race. I don't know. Maybe the racing program is just trying to simulate a real racing program as much as possible. I don't know. Now, I'm not going to go through all the names of the horses and jockeys, but I did notice there are a lot of repetitions of jockey names. Several of the jockeys have the last name Bell. There are a couple of jockeys with the name Rogers, spelled Rodgers. I know there is at least 1 jockey whose first and last name appears multiple times. And this is interesting. They list the jockey's last name, but not the first name. So you have to listen to the record to know the jockey's first name. And again, the jockeys and the horses are fictitious. Now, getting back to the horse names, remember, I'm not experienced in horse racing. I know very little, next to nothing about horse racing. Almost everything I do know, I learned from researching for this episode. But I learned that racehorses can have very bizarre names. For example, again, going with that first race, horse number 2 is called Page Sun, spelled S-O-N. Horse number 3 is called Up the Don, U-P-T-H-E-D-O-N. What in the world do these names even mean? And to an inexperienced participant listening to these records, the cadence in which Jack Lamar announces the lineup is kind of weird. Listen to how he announces Page Sun.
Breaking out of 2, Page Sun, Chuck Rogers in the arms.
Doesn't that sound weird? 2 Page Sun. It's kind of off-putting. And listen to how he announces horse number 3, Up the Don.
3 Up the Don to be guided by Bill Swift.
That confused me listening to it. Remember, I did not have the programs at first. I had to order those separately. But I listened to the records before I had the programs, and I was like, wait, 3 Up the Don? And is it that the horse's name is the Don? And he said, okay, number 2, 3 Up the Don. Or is Up the Don the horse's name? I didn't know. And actually, now that I think about it, I did do some Googling and found a picture that included the first race page of the program. So I was able to figure out what Up the Don was. But still, what on earth does that even mean? Also, in race number 5, there is a horse called Deer Park. You would think D-E-E-R Park, right? Wrong. D-E-A-R Park. So why on earth do horses sometimes have these strange names? Doing a bit of quick research, I found that the reason that racehorse names can be weird is simply because they have to be unique and identifiable, and also they cannot share names with any other horses that are currently racing in the horse racing universe. I found that the Jockey Club, based out of Arlington Heights, Illinois, just a little bit northwest of Chicago, is in charge of registering horse names, and they have some very specific rules. In addition to what I said, racehorse names are limited to 18 characters, including spaces, which explains another horse name in race number 1, number 4, Get a Load of This. You would think, get a load of this? No, it's get a load of this. It's all one word, all of the words crammed together. If you put the spaces in there, you see that it's exactly 18 characters. So I don't know why they had to do that. But the thing is, there is actually a racehorse in recent years with that exact same name. Get a load of this. So yeah, they have to limit the horse names to 18 characters. A horse name cannot consist entirely of numerals. You can have a horse named, say, 52, but you actually have to spell out FIFTY-TWO. You can't just use the numerals 5 and 2. Racehorse names cannot be offensive, and a racehorse name cannot include a horse-related term, such as filly or stallion. Also, there are retired horse names. Remember, I said one of the rules is that you cannot use the name of a currently racing horse. Well, there are some racehorse names that cannot be used because they're retired. A prime example, and even I would have concluded this, you cannot name your racehorse Secretariat. But thinking back to my commentary on Jack LaMar's cadence, I don't know if that's how he normally would have sounded during an actual horse race, but I got to give the guy a little bit of leeway because, well, he was probably working for a script. There are a couple of spots over the 4 records where it sounds like he lost his place in the script and had to find it. Also, you got to feel for the poor guy. He had to record 64 possible outcomes for this game. And I'm sure he didn't do them all in one take. I'm sure he blew some takes and had to redo them. So got to give him a little bit of leeway. But getting back to the racing program, the back of the program repeats those disclaimers that I mentioned earlier. And also I'm noticing on the back that for the 8th race, there's a notation that says the exacta. That's another horse racing term I wasn't familiar with, and it's not mentioned anywhere in the printed rules. Jack LaMar does explain it in the 8th race when he's introducing it.
There is exacta betting on this 8th race. Here's how it works. Select 2 horses in exact order of finish, first and second, before the race begins.
As for what the payout is, well, it depends. According to information I found online, if you had made a $2 exacta bet on the 2012 Kentucky Derby and correctly picked the first 2 horses to finish, that $2 you bet would have turned into $981.60. 3 years earlier, that same exacta bet paid out $2,074.60. But in the 2016 Kentucky Derby, the payout for the $2 exacta was only $30.60. I mean, that's a lot better than the $2 you started out with, but it's not $2,000 either. Having said that, though, there's nowhere in the rules or on the record that actually explains what the payout should be on the exacta. So I don't know. If you decide to play this game and use the exacta bet, I guess you can work it out with the banker. Now, here's the thing. This is a record collecting podcast, really, so I should probably talk about all the records themselves. And I'm going to assume the complete deluxe edition of They're at the Post. There are 4 12-inch records with each side designated a specific race. Record 1, side 1 is race number 2. Record 4, side 2, obviously, is race number 8. There are 8 horses in each race, and thanks to the parallel groove trick, each side of a record accounts for every horse winning. For example, side 1 has 8 grooves. Depending on which groove the stylus lands on, that's going to determine which horse wins the race. At the beginning of each race, you predictably hear the trumpet blowing first call, as you would expect. Jack LaMar introduces the race. He says how long in furlongs the race is and the age of the horses in the race. By the way, one of the races he talks about is specifically for maiden horses.
The horses for the 3rd race are now on the track. The 3rd race, a 5.5 furlong dash for maiden 2-year-olds.
That means that none of the horses in that race had ever won before. So that's another term I learned. If there's anything else special about the particular race, such as it being part of a daily double or an exacta, LaMar will mention that. He then goes through the roster of horses and jockeys, sometimes saying who owns the horse, what colors the horses and jockeys are wearing, or what stable the horse belongs to, all of which are fictitious.
Number 1, Black Kitten, the only foreign bred in the field, flying the purple silks with the green diamond. The rider is Al Cito. 2, Kiss Me Quick, Joe Eaton. 3, the early speed horse, Haul All. The rider is Mike Cooper. 4, Happy Apple, Sam Poole in the irons. 5, Newsy, Marv Green in the stirrups. 6 is In the Tub, to be guided by Tiny Brown. Breaking out of 7, Serenity Sal, Norm Gordon is up. And number 8, Helen Mary in the field of 8. The rider is Stu Bell.
Having said that, I do have a sneaking suspicion that some of these jockeys and other personalities might actually be named after real people. For example, remember that person I mentioned earlier with that unfortunate name combination, Mr. Lean, as it were? Well, listen to this.
Breaking out of 6, Echo Baby. The reinsman is Stan Simpson. Echo Baby is owned and trained by Richard Lean. And his wife, Merrill, designed the beautiful silks for Echo Baby, white with green hoops and orange diamonds.
So that tells me that there might be other characters in this game named after actual people. When the race is ready to start, Lamar says the phrase, "They're at the post."
The horses have now reached the starting point. They're at the post.
And when the starting bell rings, he announces they're off.
They're off.
As the race actually runs, he gives a very convincing and, quite frankly, exciting play-by-play on the action.
Victory Chaser first to show in front between horses. Echo Baby rushes up on the outside. Tanwood now has the lead. Echo Baby second. Victory Chaser moving through to be third. Bronze Sultan fourth on the outside. Turning into the stretch, Echo Baby leads with Mr. Leo second, and making a strong move along the rail is Balmy Beach with a Tanwood fourth. A furlong to run, and it's Echo Baby by a neck. Balmy Beach is right alongside. A Tanwood moving up third as they race past the 16 pole. It's Balmy Beach by half a length. A Tanwood is second on the rail, and Echo Baby is third. And now Balmy Beach begins to draw away from the field. It's a rocking chair ride for jockey Ed Duff. Balmy Beach wins it by 6 lengths. Very close for place between a Tanwood and Echo Baby.
He calls the winner and then confirms the winner by announcing the official results of the race.
The result of the 4th race now stands official. The winner was number 3, Balmy Beach, and that photo showed number 5, a Tanwood, to be second, and number 6, Echo Baby, was third. The running time for the 5.5 furlongs, 1:06 and 2.
You're also going to hear crowd noises ranging from the conversational murmur all the way to excited cheering. Interestingly, though, you don't actually hear the sounds of horses running, although you really don't notice what with the sound effects and Jack Lamar's announcing, and you're focusing more on that than anything else, really. I have noticed when listening to the records from the first race through the last race, the situations get slightly more complicated. For the first part, Record 1, Side 1, the first race, is pretty much best case scenario. It's just 8 horses racing, almost nothing unusual worth mentioning. But as you progress through the later races, you might hear Jack Lamar announcing unexpected or atypical things, like this.
That's Castle Lane that unseated the rider.
Or maybe this.
They're at the post. Looks pretty good. Starter looking them over. Up, that's Victorian Lady that unseated the rider to delay the start. Robbie Hayes seems to be okay, and the outrider made a good catch on Victorian Lady. Robbie Hayes is now remounting, moving back into position.
Or perhaps this remarkable display of sportsmanship.
Ladies and gentlemen, rushing over to the winner's circle to congratulate Charlotte Smith on this victory are her fellow jockeys. She has become, with this riding score, the all-time female leader at this oval.
Now here's an announcement that I want y'all to listen to.
If I sound a little extra excited about this race, it's because the JL stable on your program stands for Jack Lamar. I own Bye Bye Fifi. She's the first horse I've purchased, and this is her maiden victory.
So the announcer admitted that he owned the winning horse. Isn't that some kind of conflict of interest? I mean, if you were betting money against that horse, wouldn't you want to call shenanigans? I mean, I don't know. But if I may editorialize here, if you're not into horse racing, just by listening to any single race from They're at the Post, the very well done production just might turn you into a fan, or at the very least, like me, pique your curiosity. So really, that's the game. That's how it works. That's what the records are like. By the way, when I was at Rattleback Records on Record Store Day, I noticed they had the single disc version in stock, but I passed on it because why do I need two redundant versions in my collection, really? So, yeah, it might still be there. I don't know. So if you happen to be in the far north side of Chicago, check it out and grab it if you want it. So having said that, speaking of record stores and what's in my collection, I do like to discuss record care and collecting tips, so let's move on to that. For my spiel on record collecting in this episode, I'm going to revisit protecting your records, specifically box sets. What got me thinking about this is that They're at the Track is, well, a box set, really. Back in episode 2, I talked about using those inner sleeves for your records and outer sleeves for the covers. But what if you have a box set? Well, you still want to protect that outer box. Do they make outer protection for box sets? They sure do. And I'll put a link to a couple of options both in the show notes for this episode and on the My Weird Record Collection website at myweirdrecords.fab4it.com. Go to Stuff I Recommend and then Storage. However, before you go spending money on that stuff, I have a little tip that might save you a few bucks. That is, assuming that you already have a pack of inner sleeves or outer sleeves. For most of my vinyl box sets, I found that I can use just the outer bag that contains the pack of sleeves, and that does a pretty good job of protecting the box. So the only thing is that it leaves the top of the box exposed, but the real problem I've had with sleeves and boxes being worn is when they're pulled off the shelf. The friction quickly wears out the bottoms, so for my purpose, using those sleeve containers works pretty well. Now, one issue that I have is that while my wife and I live in a pretty good-sized 3-bedroom apartment for just the two of us, we're still kind of limited with places to put our stuff, and we really don't want to have to move to a bigger place, nor do we have the finances. And I have a lot of box sets, some CD box sets, some vinyl, and some CD and vinyl combination sets. Several of those combo sets, like the 50th anniversary Doors reissues, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's Deja Vu, they have multiple CDs and one 12-inch record. So to me, it's a waste of space to put those things on the same shelves as our records, and the records in those boxes don't have their own separate sleeves. So my solution to that, I bought a set of blank cardboard outer sleeves. Basically, they're all white blank album covers. Specifically, I got the Big Fudge 20-pack of Pro Blank album jackets, as they're called. So that way I can keep the records available with the rest of the collection without having to dig the boxes out from where I have those stored. Believe me, it is a pain in the hiney to have to pull those big boxes out from where they are. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, you'll see exactly what I mean. The cool thing about using these generic covers is that, well, I don't really feel the need to put them in outer covers. I mean, if those blank covers get worn down to the point that the record itself is exposed, I'll just replace the blank cover with another one. The 20-pack was more than what I needed. But yeah, if this sounds like something you're interested in, go to my website. Again, the URL is myweirdrecords.fab4it.com, and there will be Amazon links to both this product and the other ones that I mentioned in today's episode. Purchasing through those links will give me a small portion of the sale at no extra cost to you. By the way, if you have any tips or just methods in general that you use to manage your records, feel free to share them. Keep listening for ways that you can reach out. In the meantime, let's rate They're at the Post. Those of you who've listened to this podcast before, this will serve as a reminder, but for those of you who are new, this will be new information for you. I rate each record that I discuss on a scale of 1 through 5 inclusive on 5 factors, meaning that each record will have a score of somewhere between 5 and 25 inclusive. The first thing I rate on is based on local interest or usefulness. I determine which one of those, or maybe even both, depending on the contents of the record. I also take into account historical interest. Is the record perhaps of interest to a particular time period? Also, I rate the records based on their uniqueness and their weirdness and their enjoyability. Now, because They're at the Post is actually a complete game, and records are merely a component of the game, albeit a necessary component of the game, I might have to take into consideration the entire game holistically, but let's see what happens. First, let's talk about local interest or usefulness. Now, They're at the Post isn't really specific to any locality in particular, so I'm going to rate it based on its usefulness. The thing is, even if you don't have the complete game and you just have, well, for all practical purposes, the records, you can still make some good use out of this. You can still bet on the races as you see fit, but if you want the full experience complete with all the paperwork, the betting slips and all that, you do need the complete game. But I'm thinking that for usefulness, for what it is, They're at the Post gets a 4 out of 5. And just to add to the usefulness, you also get to learn stuff if you're not very familiar with horse racing. For example, I never knew what exactly a daily double is in the context of horse racing until I heard the announcer mentioning it on the records here, and I decided to look it up. And now I know that a daily double, in short, really, is a bet you can place on 2 back-to-back races at the same time. From what I understand, those bets pay out a little bit more because, well, it requires a little bit more luck that you correctly predict 2 races consecutively. Now let's talk about historical interest. Horse racing in and of itself is not a historical thing. It's done all the time. The product, however, well, it is a product of the mid-70s, but at the same time, somehow it just doesn't really feel dated. I'd say history is a moot point with They're at the Post, so I'll just give it a historical rating of 3 out of 5. The only real history of it is that it's an artifact of 1976. How about the uniqueness factor? Well, let me just ask you this, my friends. Where else will you find a record that can give you 8 different playback possibilities based solely on chance? Also, it's a very creative way to incorporate records into a game, and you can't really do what They're at the Post does on any other medium, really, at least not as easily. Magnetic tape to linear. Could this be done on a CD? Well, sure, you could put this on a CD and put the CD in on shuffle mode, but you also have to make sure that nobody is looking at the display when the tracks are played. But hey, if you can find a way to make it work with a CD or perhaps another form of digital playback, great, but it would take a little bit of effort. So for what it is, I feel that I need to give They're at the Post a uniqueness rating of 5 out of 5. What about weirdness? That's a tough one. It's weird that this is a set of records that contains 8 grooves per side, that's for sure. And on their own, the records are among the weirdest use of vinyl playback I've ever known of. But when you consider that it's all part of a complete game package, it's not really all that weird, so I'm going to be wishy-washy and give They're at the Post a middling weirdness rating of 3 out of 5. For the enjoyability rating, I'll have to say 4 out of 5. You can actually feel the excitement if you really pay attention to the race calling. I was getting into it just hearing the racing announcements as it was recording on my computer. In fact, there's a video on YouTube that I will link in the show notes of a bunch of guys and I think one woman at a party playing They're at the Post and really getting into it. So even in more recent years, this can still be a really enjoyable game. So why am I not giving this a 5 out of 5? Well, I'm going to admit partly because it does kind of go hand in hand with gambling. So you got to be really careful with that. You got to be really careful with your gambling. And also, I don't know, there's part of me that kind of thinks that it might promote, well, I really haven't done a lot of research into this, but I'm just not a fan of making horses race like that. I want to believe that over the years there have been some strict standards put into place that make sure that horses aren't abused, but there's still a little bit of me that just doesn't like the thought of it. Having said that, I don't judge anybody who participates or is into horse racing. That's just my own personal thing. The cool thing, though, is with They're at the Post, you can actually enjoy horse racing knowing that in the process, no horses are actually at any kind of risk. So to recap, I'm rating the record 4 for usefulness, 3 for historical interest, 5 for uniqueness, 3 for weirdness, and 4 for enjoyability, which gives their At the Post a total of 19 out of 25, making it tie with Your Favorites by the Singing Johnson Family as my 3rd highest ranked among the records I've discussed in this podcast. But the thing is, they can't both share a slot. I won't allow it. So I will have to place their At the Post based on my likelihood of listening to it. I can't say that if I'm going to listen to something for enjoyability that their At the Post is going to be my first choice, unless I'm actually playing the game. I mean, not only is it just an announcement of a faux horse race, but also, even though it's on 12-inch vinyl, the entire record side lasts only a bit over 2.5 minutes. So I'd have to get up and restart, flip, or change the record every 160-ish seconds, so it's gonna fall below Your Favorites by the Singing Johnson Family. That, my friends, is their At the Post. What are your thoughts on that horse racing game, or just even the records by themselves? Are you familiar with it? Have you ever actually played it? Do you remember seeing it advertised on TV? You can share with me your thoughts on this or anything else relevant to this podcast through various methods. My email address is myweirdrecords@fab4it.com, and Fab4 is spelled F-A-B, the number 4, and then IT. My handle on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram is myweirdrecords. Note to self, try to use Blue Sky once in a while. I also have a YouTube channel at youtube.com/@myweirdrecords. And not only do I put the audio of the records I feature on the podcast on that channel if I can't find them on another channel, I also put this podcast itself on YouTube. By the way, given that there are 8 races in there At the Post, and each of those 8 races has 8 possible outcomes, that's 64 races. I might not have all the races posted in time for this podcast episode to be released. There might only be a handful, but I promise you there will be something up there. The website for this podcast, by the way, which includes the show notes for each episode, is at myweirdrecords.fab4it.com. Please leave a review of this podcast at Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, wherever you happen to listen to this podcast. As always, I thank Tim Christ for allowing me to use his record, The Pac-Man EP, as the basis for this podcast's artwork. You can check out Tim, aka Shoebox, and his music at worm-quartet.web.app. I also offer a hearty thanks to Kevin Zerb, who designed the artwork for this podcast. Kevin's podcasts and music are available on the web at zerbinator.com. Now, here's the thing. Episode 6, the next episode, is due out on June 15th. The thing is, I'm going to be away on vacation that day, which means I have to have the episode in the can, edited, and uploaded to the server and scheduled for an auto-release before then. I'm going to be away in London. Now, to coincide with that trip to London, episode 6 will cover a record that was actually made in London, and I think it'll actually work well given the circumstances of my vacation and the time that I'm going to be not physically present. The name of the record, Custom Music for 8mm. Until then, this is Sean reminding you to please support your local record store. And if anybody knows of a good place in London to buy some weird records, you have all my contact information. Talk to you again soon, folks.
Jockey Merle Wilson has lodged an objection against jockey Neve Silver for alleged interference through the stretch.
The front of the box, for some reason, it says Brant's. What is a Brant? And there's no little red underscore on there. I have to look that up. Vocabulary building with Sean. That should be Braggs. I will finish that. Fix that. I can't even say finish correctly.